Sylvester Stallone wasn't just a movie star to young Ellie. He was hope in human form. But when a quiet letter found its way into Stallone's hands, everything changed. This wasn't a typical fan request. It was something deeper, something final. Stay with us and let us know where you're watching from today. We love hearing from you. It was a gray Thursday afternoon in Philadelphia. The kind of day where the sidewalks gleamed with leftover rain, and the wind smelled faintly of hot pretzels and damp asphalt. Stallone had just finished his workout at an old gym tucked behind 9th Street, a place that hadn't changed much since the days when Rocky was just a dream scribbled in a worn notebook. Most of the younger trainers had already left, their voices echoing in the empty hallways, talking about their weekend plans, games, and girlfriends. Stallone lingered near the entrance, rewrapping the tape around his knuckles, out of habit, staring at the walls lined with fading posters of fighters long forgotten by the world. Just as he was about to head out into the drizzle, an elderly janitor approached him, holding a small, slightly crumpled envelope. "Guy dropped this off earlier," he said, wiping his hands on his worn overalls. "Said it's important. Wouldn't leave his name." Stallone nodded, sliding the envelope into the pocket of his hoodie without giving it much thought. Letters weren't unusual. They came in all the time. Scripts, fan notes, charity requests. But this one felt different. No fancy printing, no assistant's scribbled sticky notes, just a child's handwriting, shaky and unsure, spelling out simply, "To Mr. Stallone." Later that night, after a simple dinner of grilled chicken and brown rice, Stallone sat by the fireplace in his South Philadelphia home, the television playing some late-night news he wasn't really watching. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the envelope. He tore it open carefully. Inside was a short letter. "Dear Mr. Stallone, my name is Ellie James. I'm 10 years old. I watch Rocky and Creed movies with my grandpa when I'm in the hospital. My mom says I might not make it to Christmas, but Grandpa says it's okay because I'm strong, like Rocky. Thank you for teaching me to be brave. Love, Ellie." Stallone sat back in his armchair, blinking at the letter. His rough fingers traced the shaky words. He read it once, then again. The noise from the TV seemed to fall away. Outside, the rain began tapping softly against the window panes, a slow, steady rhythm. Stallone stood up, still holding the letter, and walked to the window. The city stretched out before him, blurred and wet, but somehow it felt closer, heavier. He picked up his phone and called Tony, his longtime assistant. "I need you to find this girl," Stallone said quietly. His voice didn't have its usual edge. It carried something softer, something urgent. "Sure, Sly. You want to send her something? A signed glove? A video message?" "No," Stallone said. He stared out at the rain. "I want to see her." The next morning, Stallone canceled 2 meetings, including a luncheon with a film producer pitching a new action script. He didn't care. Some things, he thought, were more important than another movie deal. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia was a bustling place, even under the gray morning light. Families moved through the lobbies with heavy hearts and hopeful smiles. Nurses in colorful scrubs pushed carts filled with books and stuffed animals. Stallone arrived through a side entrance, wearing a simple black hoodie and jeans, his cap pulled low. No entourage, no flashing cameras. This wasn't a publicity stunt. This was something personal. A young nurse named Claire met him at the door. She recognized him immediately, but said nothing about it. Just smiled warmly and led him through winding hallways where colorful murals tried to distract from the smell of antiseptic and the buzz of monitors. "Ellie's awake," Claire said softly, "but she's tired. She's been talking about you for days." Stallone felt something heavy settle in his chest. As they neared the room, he heard it. A faint humming, shaky but unmistakable, the Rocky theme. "Gonna fly now," drifting out in weak little notes. He smiled in spite of himself, blinking against the sting in his eyes. Claire paused at the door. "She doesn't know you're coming," she whispered. "She just hoped." When Stallone stepped into the room, he saw her, a tiny figure buried in a sea of hospital blankets, her face pale, her hair thinning from treatments. Her mother sat by the window, clutching a worn Bible. Ellie turned her head at the sound of footsteps. For a long second, she just stared. Her big brown eyes widened. "Rocky," she breathed. Stallone chuckled, rough and genuine. "Hey, champ," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Ellie grinned, a spark lighting up her fragile face. She tried to sit up straighter, but Stallone moved quickly to her side, helping her adjust the pillows behind her back. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "You're pretty good at predictions," Stallone said, settling into a chair beside her bed. He pulled out a gray hoodie from his bag, one of his own, signed carefully across the front. "Brought you something." Ellie clutched it with shaking hands, holding it against her chest like it was made of gold. They talked for a long time, longer than the nurses had expected, about her favorite scenes, how she watched Rocky run up the museum steps over and over, cheering every time. How she once tried to make her own training montage with her dog chasing her around the backyard. Her voice faded in and out with exhaustion, but her spirit never faltered. Then Ellie grew quiet for a moment. She twisted the hoodie between her fingers. "Mr. Stallone," she said hesitantly, "can I tell you a secret?" He leaned closer. "Sure, kid." "I'm scared," she whispered, "but not of where I'm going. I'm scared. They'll forget me." The words hit Stallone like a punch to the gut. He took her hand, so small and fragile, in his own. "I won't forget you," he said firmly. "I promise. And anybody who's strong enough to fight like you, they don't ever get forgotten." Ellie smiled, a soft, sleepy smile. "Will you fight for me?" she asked. "When you do hard things, when you feel tired, will you keep fighting?" Stallone swallowed hard. His voice was thick when he answered. "I will, Ellie. I swear it." She nodded once, satisfied, her eyelids fluttering. As Stallone stood to leave, Ellie's mother approached him, her eyes red but grateful. "Thank you," she whispered. "You gave her something none of us could. You made her believe again." Stallone nodded, unable to find words. He squeezed Ellie's hand one last time, then walked out into the cold afternoon rain, the city lights blurring into halos of gold and silver. In his pocket, Ellie's letter rested against his heart. He didn't need a movie script today. He had something better, something real. The days that followed were restless. Stallone returned to Los Angeles, but his mind never quite left that small hospital room in Philadelphia. He tried distracting himself with old routines, morning jogs through Beverly Hills, script readings over bitter espresso, endless meetings where people pitched him the next big thing, but none of it filled the hollow feeling he carried inside. Late at night, he sat by the window of his den, the city sprawling endlessly beyond, holding Ellie's letter folded neatly between his palms. It was soft now, worn at the edges. The ink faded slightly where his fingers traced her name over and over. One evening, he opened his worn leather notebook, the same one he'd carried through decades of wins and losses, and turned to a blank page. He scribbled down Ellie's words, preserving them like a prayer. Fight when it's hard. Fight when you're tired. Fight for those who can't anymore. He underlined the last sentence 3 times. His assistant, Tony, noticed the change. Stallone turned down new scripts, ignored sponsorship offers. His usual driven energy shifted into something quieter, heavier. Finally, Tony asked him outright, "Sly, what's going on, man? You've never turned down a fight in your life." Stallone just shook his head, staring out at the setting sun, and said, "This one's different." That weekend, he made up his mind. He booked a flight back to Philadelphia without telling anyone, not even Tony. He packed light, just a duffel bag, a gray hoodie, and the notebook. As the plane touched down, the city greeted him with a cold drizzle. It was the kind of rain that soaked your jacket in minutes, but made the streets smell alive, fresh, aching with stories. He didn't head for a hotel. Instead, he took a cab straight to Children's Hospital. The nurse, Claire, met him at the entrance. She didn't smile this time. Her eyes told him everything before she spoke. "She's weaker today," she said, voice trembling slightly. "Still awake, but it's getting close." Stallone nodded once, pushing the brim of his hat lower. He wasn't here to be recognized. He was here because he had made a promise. They moved quickly through the hospital corridors. Children in tiny wheelchairs waved as he passed, their eyes wide, but too polite to call out. Staff members nodded respectfully. Everyone seemed to know why he was there, but no one spoke of it. In Ellie's room, the lights were dimmed. Her mother sat in a rocking chair, an unfinished crossword on her lap. She stood when Stallone entered, giving him a small, broken smile. Ellie lay still, her face even paler than before, the machines beside her softly humming. But when Stallone knelt beside her bed, her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she looked confused, and then recognition bloomed across her fragile features. "You came back," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Always," he said, squeezing her hand gently. "Remember, fighters never quit." She gave a tiny, tired laugh that broke his heart. He pulled out the leather notebook, placing it carefully on her bedside table. "I wrote something for you," he said. She blinked slowly, curious. Stallone opened the book to the page he had written on the plane. Ellie James, fighter, dreamer, champion of the unseen battles. Beneath it, he had drawn a simple star, a small, crooked sketch, but sincere. Her eyes filled with tears, but she smiled, a smile so full of gratitude and peace that Stallone thought he might break right there beside her. They talked for a little while, about her dreams, about what it felt like to fly in her imagination when her body grew too weak to run. She asked about his favorite Rocky movie, and he laughed and said, "The first one, always." It wasn't about winning. It was about standing up. Ellie nodded solemnly. She understood in a way most grown-ups never could. Then, after a pause, she asked, "Can I ask one last thing?" "Anything," Stallone said, his voice thick. Ellie's tiny hand struggled to lift itself, and he quickly helped steady it. She pointed toward the window, where the faint gray light still filtered through the curtains. "If I'm not here tomorrow," she said carefully, "and if you ever have to fight again, in anything, could you do it for kids like me? Not just for yourself?" Stallone felt something inside him shift, something permanent. He leaned closer, forehead almost touching hers, and whispered, "I swear it, Ellie. Every step, Every breath, every fight, it'll be for you, for all of you." Ellie smiled faintly, her eyes closing again, as if the promise wrapped her in warmth. Her mother wiped her eyes quietly behind him. Stallone sat there a long while, even after Ellie drifted into sleep, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor and the quiet world outside her window. When he finally rose to leave, he pressed the notebook gently into her mother's hands. "It's hers," he said. "Every page left in there. Fill it with her dreams." Outside, the rain had eased into a soft mist. The streets of Philadelphia glistened under the old streetlights. Stallone walked slowly, hands deep in his jacket pockets, feeling older and smaller than he had in years. He didn't head back to the airport. Instead, he wandered through the city, past Independence Hall, past the Liberty Bell, places where history had been carved into stone and spirit. He thought about legacy, about what it meant to be remembered, not as a celebrity, not as a symbol, but as a fighter who had kept his promises. That night, he booked a modest room at a small inn near Rittenhouse Square. No fancy hotels, no room service. He spent the evening writing, pages and pages pouring out of him. Memories of the first time he believed in Rocky. Memories of the first punch he ever threw. The first story he ever told. And now, memories of a little girl who had fought her biggest fight with nothing but a smile and a shaky voice. He knew he couldn't save her. No one could. But maybe he could keep fighting in her name. Maybe he could make sure no kid like Ellie ever felt invisible again. He made another decision then. Quiet, but final. He would start something. Something real, something lasting. Not another charity gala. Not another photo op. Something that would matter in the spaces where cameras never went. He smiled, a tired, aching smile, as he thought of the perfect name. He closed his notebook and leaned back against the creaking wooden chair, whispering to the night, "For the fighters nobody sees." In the quiet dark, with Philadelphia breathing gently beyond the rain-washed windows, Sylvester Stallone felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not the thrill of fame, not the pressure of expectation, but something simpler. Purpose. The next morning, Stallone woke early to the low hum of traffic on Walnut Street, the mist still lingering over the sidewalks. He skipped breakfast, pulled on the same worn hoodie he had worn to the hospital, and made his way back to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He knew in his gut that this visit would be different. As he walked through the automatic doors, Claire met him with red-rimmed eyes and a quiet sadness that spoke louder than words. She took his hand, squeezed it briefly, and said only, "She's resting now, but she asked for you." Stallone followed her down the hallways that had become almost familiar in their quiet resilience, passing drawings taped to the walls, superheroes, rainbows, stick figures holding hands. When he entered Ellie's room, he found her sleeping peacefully, the covers pulled up to her chin, her small hands resting atop the leather notebook. Her mother sat nearby, a cup of untouched coffee cooling beside her, looking up with a smile that wavered at the edges. Stallone sat down by the bed, resting his arms on his knees, and for a long time he just watched her breathe, in and out, slow and steady, like the rhythm of an old song you never quite forget. After a while, Ellie stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. She smiled faintly when she saw him, her voice barely more than a breath. "You came." Stallone leaned closer, his voice steady even as his heart cracked. "Of course, I told you. Fighters keep their promises." She coughed weakly and gestured to the notebook. He opened it and found a new page. Her handwriting, shakier but still determined. Dear Mr. Stallone, if I don't wake up again, please don't be sad. I'm not afraid. I had you as a friend. Tell the other kids they matter too. Tell them they're seen. Love, Ellie. Stallone closed his eyes, pressing the notebook gently against his forehead. When he looked up, Ellie was watching him with a peaceful kind of knowing. She raised her hand slowly, and he took it carefully in his, marveling at how someone so small could hold so much strength. Will you remember? She whispered. Forever, he said. She smiled, and for a moment the room seemed to glow, like the whole world was holding its breath for her. As the monitors hummed gently, as the rain thickened outside, Ellie closed her eyes again. This time, she didn't open them. Stallone stayed beside her long after the doctors confirmed what they already knew. He didn't cry in that moment. Instead, he pressed a kiss to the top of her head, like a blessing, and whispered, Rest easy, champ. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that somewhere, the bravest fighter it never knew had laid down her gloves. In the days that followed, Stallone moved quietly. He attended Ellie's small memorial service held at a community church near the Schuylkill River. No cameras, no reporters, just family, friends, and a few nurses from the hospital. He sat in the back pew, head bowed, hands folded tightly. When Ellie's mother stood to speak, her voice strong even through the tremble, she said, Ellie loved Rocky because he reminded her that even when you get knocked down, you can still get back up. She believed that with her whole heart, and today she would want us to remember that strength isn't about muscles or medals. It's about hope. It's about love. Stallone felt tears sting his eyes, hot and blinding, but he let them fall silently, honoring the promise he made, to feel it all, to carry it forward. After the service, he slipped out quietly, leaving behind a small envelope at Ellie's memorial table. Inside was a single note. You'll always be my greatest champion, Sly. Returning to Los Angeles didn't erase the weight he carried. Instead, it deepened his resolve. Stallone met with Tony and a few close friends over coffee in a small diner tucked away in West Hollywood. Over the hum of clinking mugs and the scent of bacon frying on the griddle, he laid it out simply. I'm starting something, a foundation. Not about publicity, not about movies, about real kids. The ones nobody notices, the ones who fight the hardest battles. Tony nodded without hesitation. They drafted the paperwork within days. They named it The Fighters Nobody Sees, just like Stallone had whispered to the night back in Philadelphia. No grand press conference announced it. No celebrity endorsements. Just small, quiet beginnings. Anonymous hospital visits. Personalized notes sent to sick children across the country. Care packages that showed up without fanfare, but carried hope wrapped inside them. Stallone made it a personal mission. Whenever he traveled, he asked to be taken quietly to a children's hospital nearby. No photos, no announcements. He would sit by bedsides, tell stories about resilience, about courage, about how real fighters were the ones who didn't wear championship belts, but hospital bracelets. He carried Ellie's leather notebook everywhere he went. It grew heavier with each visit, new pages filled by trembling hands, new dreams scribbled in colored crayons, new promises whispered into the quiet spaces between beeping machines and tired prayers. Months later, during an interview for a magazine profile, a journalist noticed the notebook peeking out from Stallone's worn duffel bag. She asked about it, gently, curious. For a moment, Stallone hesitated. Then, without grandstanding, without dramatics, he said, "It's my reminder. A reminder of a girl who fought harder than anyone I ever met. She asked me to keep fighting for those who can't, and I intend to." The article came out with little fanfare, but the readers noticed. Letters poured in, not asking for autographs or photos, but thanking him, sharing their own stories of small fighters and quiet battles. And everywhere he went after that, Stallone saw it, in little gestures, small smiles, quiet nods from strangers who understood that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones nobody sees. Years later, long after blockbuster deals had come and gone, after the noise of Hollywood had dimmed into something quieter, Stallone sat in his living room, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the windows. He opened Ellie's notebook once again, flipping through the pages. He stopped at the first letter she had written him, the words still as clear, as urgent, as they had been the first night he read them. "Thank you for helping me be brave." He smiled, a small private smile, and closed the book gently. Outside, the night was deep and calm, the city breathing in soft rhythms. Stallone leaned back, resting his head against the chair, and closed his eyes. He wasn't chasing anything anymore. He wasn't running. He was exactly where he needed to be, keeping his promise, carrying forward a small girl's last wish, to fight not for applause, not for fame, but for love, for dignity, for hope. And somewhere, he liked to believe, in the quiet corners of the universe, a little girl was still smiling, her spirit as fierce and beautiful as ever, reminding him, even now, never to stop fighting for what matters most.